Do you ever feel like gel plate printing is a bit of a mystery, especially when it comes to layering? You roll out the paint, you pull a print, and it's either too dull, muddy, or just not kind of what you wanted. You're not alone. Many artists struggle when it comes to how layering is going to actually work on the gel plate. But today we're going to change that. In this video, I'm going to walk you through, step by step, how to create beautiful layered prints on the gel plate. You'll learn how to build up depth, create texture, and choose colors that will actually work together. I'll break everything down so you can finally see the layering process clearly and get results you'll love. My art practice is quite seasonal. I do a lot of botanical printing in the summer and early fall when the plants are available. The rest of the year, I use those and other prints to create mixed media collages. I've been making a lot of collages lately and have used up a lot of my beautiful accent papers. I love to use them in the backgrounds to add depth and structure to my botanical images. Fortunately, I can make these layered papers at any time of the year. So let's just cover our supplies for today. First of all, I'm going to be using the Yasutomo sketch paper. This is 9 by 12, so useful size. Comes in a pad of 48 sheets. It's acid free, so that's kind of nice. So today I'm going to be using my 12 by 14 inch plate. My paper fits nicely lengthwise on this, and I don't need the entire plate to print these. I have a variety of Brayers in different sizes. Today I'll be primarily using this one. This is the one that I use the most. It's a 4-inch Brayer, and it just covers things nice and quickly. Now for the paint today, I'm primarily going to be using Golden Open. I just like the fact that I can get so many prints out of it, and a very small amount goes a very long way with these paints. I'll also be using some miscellaneous brand fluids, some Goldens and some other fluids to just tint the paint in different ways. And you could certainly use a different brand, such as an Amsterdam or something like that. What I would do if I did that was just simply mix a little bit of the Golden Open gel into it, and that gives it a little bit more open time. It means it won't stick on dry on your plate quite so quickly. Now to make some texture on the first layers, I've got a variety of stamps that I've made myself, either cutting out some letters, or corrugated cardboard is always a favorite of mine, and I just press that in to create texture in the first layer. I also have a variety of strings, threads, and yarns that also can create some patterns, which is nice. And of course, you've got anything else that you can stamp into the plate to create maybe circles or rectangles or whatever else you have. I like to raid packaging. Before packaging is allowed to go into the recycle bin, I like to pick and choose and see if there's anything in there I can use. Now, there's no vegetation at this time of the year. Everything's pretty bleak out there. But I do have some nice stencils that I've created using positive prints or negative prints from the past. So I'll be using some of these to also create some texture and some interest in my prints. And although we don't have any green vegetation, I do have some dried grasses. So when I'm thinking about colors, I find that for these ones, I want to keep the color fairly pure. I don't want it too muted. So I tend to pick colors from the same side of the color wheel. So if I'm working with a purple, I might add a blue and vice versa. If I've got some greens going on, like sap green and green gold, then I might add a yellow. Or to the sap green, I might add a blue. If you cross the color wheel and, for example, add a yellow to a purple, then you're going to have a very muted result, and that might be exactly what you want. I have a video called Harnessing Color, the Key to Beautiful Gel Prints. I'll leave a link to that in the description below, and it'll help guide you in terms of what colors you might want to pick for your layering projects. So when I do a batch of these papers, I like to think about what colors that I need. So right now I'm doing a lot of collages that involve blues and purples and a warm neutral tone. So that'll be my first round. And what I like to do is I like to print a batch. So I will print perhaps first layers on 10, 15 or more pages. Let those dry, and then I'll add more layers to them. And because I'm using the Golden Open paints, I'm going to end up with more than one pull out of each roll-up. The first one, of course, will be darker, and the second one will be lighter. And both the light and the dark ones are useful for layering. Now, I like to texture this. I will use corrugated cardboard in various patterns. I find this is useful to just create something a little bit more interesting. Here's another one I made out of strings. And this is just little wooden pieces glued onto a backing board. The dollar store is a great place to find this sort of stuff. And if this is a little bit plain, I can add to the design by putting in some circles of different sizes. Oops. Could also roll that along for an extra little bit of texture. Yeah, that's an interesting pattern. I don't want to take the paint right off down to the plate at any point, because I do want some kind of a faint background at the very least. So I've got this layer textured. Take my rice paper, and I find that printing on the smooth side provides a good result. But if you haven't printed with this kind of paper before, I'd encourage you to try both sides, as they do give you a different result. Oh, I love rubbing the backs of the pages. And I really like the way that you can actually start to see what's coming through. There's enough of a sort of a bleed through of the paint through the paper that you can see what texture you've created. So this is a lovely blue violet with some interesting little patterns on it. Now what's left here on the plate is going to give me a really nice second print. It'll be lighter than the first, and the difference between the blue and the purple areas will be a little bit more splotchy. So that's a paler version of that same print, and that's going to be very interesting as well. Now I could take a third one. I'm sure there's still something there, but I think I'll just add a little bit more paint to it and carry on from there. So I think I'm going to add a bit more blue to the purple that's still on the plate. The purple's a very strong color, dioxazine purple, and it sticks around. It gives you more prints. The ultramarine blue is a lovely color as well, but not as strong and as lasting as the purple. So this will pick up quite a bit of the purple that was underneath and give me an even darker blue violet. There we go. I'll give this a little bit of texture with some different things. You can just print a totally plain layer as your first layer. I like to do it this way because it's almost as if I get two layers out of it. I get something from underneath, plus I get the pattern that I've put into it. So this one should be quite dark. And it's very, very beautiful dark blue violet. And then, of course, I'll get a second one off of that. That will be lighter. Oops. Oh, I didn't quite get that squared up before it plopped down, but that's okay. I'd be more concerned about getting it straight if the prints were going to be the end result and perhaps be framed. What a lovely combination of violets and blues that is. Now I also want to print some that have a bit of a neutrality. I'm just going to use this transparent red iron oxide, put it on there, and that's going to take what's already there and what's already on my brayer, because there's some on my brayer as well. This is going to give me a more neutral print. I am finding for most of my collages that I want something with quite a lot of color in it in the papers at the bottom so that they show through the layers. There's that pattern coming through again. Now this one's more of a mid-tone than a super dark because the transparent red iron oxide isn't all that dark, and I just have a bit of the purple peeking through. There we go, and that one's quite nice. That one's gotten a little bit more neutral, and it's obviously quite a bit lighter as well. Now when I'm going to change either color or value, then I like to just clean up the plate a bit. So I'm going to change over to some warm colors now. So if I left all that paint on the plate, it would get pretty murky. So if you're a person who's struggling a bit with the whole mud issue and finding that your prints sometimes come out a bit mucky, well, that might be something for you to think about. That maybe you need to clean that plate off when you're switching color or value. So I'm going to use some transparent red iron oxide, and I'm going to warm it up even a little bit further with just a little bit of Indian yellow. These are two very nice transparent colors that work really well together. So these are some strips of letters that I made out of wooden letters. You can pick them up at the dollar store. And I couldn't resist doing some big ones as well. Large letters or numbers can make very interesting design elements in your work. This is just the bottom of a cake tray. And yeah, it makes a nice set of concentric circles. I like that. You don't have to put it everywhere. I can see the big letters and I can see the cake tray lines coming through. It's always cool. You've got a preview. Oh, that's a lovely warm color. That'll be a good base to put something else over top of. Oh, that's nice. That one leans more towards the yellow. So mainly out of this first layer, I'm just looking for a nice base color, no white left on the paper, and some texture that will come through in the second and third layers. I usually take 2 prints at least from each roll up so that I have something to work with in the second round, that some are darker, some are midtones, and some are lighter. See, now that one, the texture is much, much more subtle, but the color is beautiful. Okay, so the last color variation I want to work with today is in the green family. And I've made some really, really interesting papers before with the greens, but I didn't keep the color clean enough. I mixed in too many complements and near complements. And then by the time I got through the layers, they were a bit dull. So this time I'm going to do it with cleaner color to start with. I'm just using sap green and a bit of the green gold. I do like using 2 colors, and I do like squeezing it directly onto the plate. It gives me a variegated motley look that I find I enjoy. But if you just wanted to put on a plain color, that would be fine. And if it wasn't a color that comes out of a tube, you can always mix it on a palette and then just put it on the plate and roll it up, and you'd get one continuous one. And again, that's one of the topics that I cover in my harnessing color on the gel plate video. Now, this is quite consistently corrugated, so I think I'm just going to double stamp it with this one, just to give it a bit of a, oh yeah, that's kind of interesting. So on this side, I've put string on here that's in a different pattern than on this side. And when you're making your stamps, that's definitely something you can do, is use both sides. There's a little bit of corrugated foam in between. Now there's quite a bit of paint on here, so this first pull should be a good strong green of mid to dark value. I can see my circles coming through. I love that. There we go. Oh yeah, that's a good mid-dark with lots of nice clean color on it, which is what I was looking for. Now the second one should be a little bit lighter and probably a little bit more yellowish, because I did have that green gold in there. Oh yeah, I quite like that. So I think I will add just a little bit of blue to that. And a little bit more sap green. Some of that yellow, goldy, green gold stuff will stick around. It's always kind of nice when you have this golden open paint, the stuff that's on your plate stays viable, and then it mixes in together with what you put on top. And it's quite interesting, the different results you get from that. I really like circles as a motif. Whether I use them at this point or whether I use them later on. Oh, that's a lovely blue-green. And this one will be lighter, and more of the yellow that was underneath will come through. Oh yeah. And I'm going to do one more print. There's not a lot on there still, but I think there's enough to give me one more quite light and interesting print. Oh yeah, that's beautiful. Great. So that's the end of layer 1. As soon as that's dry, I'll come back, we'll review them, and we'll look at putting a second layer on. So here are the papers printed with the first textured layer. The value for this layer is primarily controlled by the amount of paint on the plate. So the first prints are darker than the second print. With the second prints, there's less paint left on the plate, so a lighter paper. Now some of these I think could be used for collage directly. I mean, some of these are lovely. They've already got enough texture and variation and color. And if you were to take out, you know, a little circle stencil or something like that, I can find interesting little bits. And if I were to take out my L's as well, there's all kinds of little pieces in here that could be used directly for collage. So now I'm getting ready to add second layers. And I've got a couple of choices that I need to think about. So for each of these papers, would I like to make the paper darker or lighter? For example, this paper is already pretty darn dark, so I might want to use a lighter layer on top of that. And to achieve that, I'd have to make sure that that layer was opaque. There's other ones, like this, for example, which is already pretty light, and I could add a darker layer onto that. I'm also going to want to think about saving some of this color and texture from the first layer when I add my second layer. So simply using stamps to get more texture isn't going to do that. I would like to actually have chunks of this that would be saved. So to do that, I'm going to be using a mask. Now you might also think of a mask as being a stencil. They're very similar. And often people use that term interchangeably. But basically what's going to happen when I put either a botanical item on the plate, or in this case a Duralar mask is it's going to save the areas that are underneath from being printed with the new ink. So all these background areas will get the new color, and when I lift the paper off, the area that's underneath the mask will be the color that we see now. And masks come in a lot of forms. Like I say, they can be like a stencil, something that you've cut out, but it can also be things like grasses or other kinds of vegetation. And this is also where my string and my threads can come in as well. Anything that I lay down on the plate before I do the print will leave a void underneath it, and that will allow this color to show through. And at this point, it's also very handy to have some extra pages, some extra blank pages ready. Because when we use a mask, we will get both a negative print, but when we lift the mask material, we'll also end up with a positive print. And sometimes those are worth putting onto a new piece of paper rather than onto one that's already been printed. Color-wise, when I'm looking at doing a second layer, I don't want to, again, create really dull collage paper prints. So again, I'm going to try to stay on the same side of the color wheel rather than going across the color wheel. So for example, with these prints, I would be looking at putting on a layer which was still in the blue-violet range. So I want to make those prints lighter. So I'm going to start off with a good little dose of titanium white. And I'm going to put just a bit of dioxazine purple in it. I don't want this to go too super light and chalky, so we'll see how this goes. I'd like to get kind of a mid-value or a mid-light value. Again, I don't want a super well-mixed paint, but I don't want too many blobby things either, so I thought I would just take a moment to give it a little bit of a gel plate stir. And for this one, I think I'll use this stencil to start with, or this mask. Really, masks and stencils, it just depends on whether you push the paint through them or whether they block paint from being transferred. And I'm going to start with this one. So this hopefully will give me kind of a velvety type of appearance. And when you're using some type of a mask, you just want to make sure that the edges of the mask have been pressed down firmly into the paper. Oh, that's quite interesting. So there I've got a print now which is darker in areas. It'll dry a little bit darker as well. It's got more purple, more texture. Okay, I'm just going to add some more white. Stir that into what's already there. So this one will be a lighter tone than the previous one. And this is a favorite stencil of mine. And all these stencils that I have, I've just made them from prints. Basically dark negative prints. Scanned them in, created stencils out of them, and cut them on my Cricut cutter. And I have a video about that. If you're interested, I'll leave a link in the description. So this is over that very, very blue paper. Oh, and that's quite nice. That's a nice contrast there. It's got value contrast between the darker blue and the lighter violet. And it's also got that nice bit of color contrast as well. Now this one is a lighter version of the same paper, and there's still quite a bit of paint left on here, so I'm going to put that on here. I'm not going to get as much contrast because it's a second print, so there's less paint left on the plate. So it gives me a more subtle version of that. And that I might not leave that there. I think that's a print that I might put another layer over top of. But it's starting to get some interesting and more complex areas. And this, I think, could be quite interesting. So I'm just going to put this print onto a plain piece of paper. Same stuff, same rice paper. Oh, yes. And see, this has much more complexity than just textured print, or if I just printed the positive itself. It's got information from those previous pieces of paper. It's got a variety of value on here. So this is an interesting print that I might just leave as it is, even though it was really just one layer. I'm going to use some of my grasses. I found these in a ditch over by the dog park. I do get a lot of stuff from the dog park. It's amazing. And just to get a few lines going across, I'm just going to put down a few threads as well. Now I'm going to use this one that's a sort of a dark mid-tone and putting this lighter stuff over top of it. And this is opaque, so it's going to cover up what's under there except for where the grasses and the string are. And there we go. Oh, that's come out quite well. So the grasses have preserved that sort of mid to dark tone underneath. And I really love the fact that the corrugated cardboard, the circles, the little squares, etc. that I put is visible but not dominant in this. So this could be quite an interesting paper all on its own, or it could get another, or it could go with another layer. Now I quite like this, but I'm not sure there's enough paint on there to really, well, it might. It's a bit of a gamble. I could use that over top something like this. There may be enough value contrast. These don't always work out because it always depends on how much do you have left on your plate. Now it's very subtle, but I think it's quite interesting. Okay, so now I'm going to switch to a different color mixed in with the white. So I need to clean the plate, need to clean the brayer, and if I'm going to be using these, I need to clean these stencils as well. Otherwise, there'll be a significant paint transfer to the next color. I think I'll go back to this stencil, pardon me, mask. And I'm going to use this one. So it still has a little bit of the purplish in it. I think this might be a very interesting layer. But the original layer is a little dull, so let's see what happens when I put this opaque layer over. Oh, yeah. So that is quite interesting, and I've gotten quite a lot of material from the original print, both in the voids, but also in the background areas. It's going to be very interesting to see what this one dries like. And I'm going to take a second print from this with the stencil still in place on this paper. Oh yeah. So I would plan on putting a third layer on this paper, but that's an improvement on the original paper for sure. So I'm going to add more white to this. So step it down in value. And I'm going to take this quite bright one, and I'd like to see it knocked back a little bit. It's a little bit too bright for what I'm doing, and this might do the trick. There we go. Oh yes. So again, that'll be interesting to see what it's like when it dries, but there's still quite a lot of information coming through from layer number 1, and now we've got layer number 2 on that. So far, we've gone lighter on the second layer. Let's do a couple now where we would be going darker. So in this case, I'm going to go really pretty dark. I want to have a fairly good contrast. So I'm going to use some Van Dyke Brown, which, you know, is similar to a burnt umber. And I'm going to use a bit of carbon black. So you can kind of see I'm serious about the getting darker thing. And the carbon black is fairly opaque, so that will, you know, blend well with the Van Dyke Brown and give me something in between. Some colors can look so dark when you roll them onto the plate, and then when you actually print them, you find out how transparent they are. But with this combination of the brown and the black, I think I should get a fairly good coverage. Now this is one that I would like to do this with. I would like this color to become sort of an accent color. I'm going to use some of the dried grasses so that I'll just see that kind of poking through. And I'm just going to use a little bit of string as kind of a, you know, contrasting form. Now, wherever I've got either the grass or the string, I'll get this color in the next layer. And then everything else will become that color. There we go. So you can see how that layered. Now I've taken one print from this. There's still quite a bit of paint left on the plate, but it's going to be splotchy and a little bit more uneven. And I think that might go well over top of this one. There. So in here you can see that although I haven't got as much contrast, I've got some really nice texture from that being a second layer. Now I want to do the same thing for these two. I'd like to add a dark layer. And I think I'm going to use Payne's Gray. Payne's Gray is actually a mixture of black and blue, and it's fairly translucent, so we'll see how that works out. So I've got a nice mask on this. So wherever the mask is, this color will stay, and wherever the mask isn't, will become much darker. Oh, there we go. That's an improvement on that. There we go. Oh, that's worked out quite well. I think as this blue dries, I'll still be able to see quite a bit of what was underneath, but primarily what was underneath is now going to be an accent color. So let's review some of the papers so far. I think it's worthwhile taking some time at this stage and not just rushing to put another layer on something. I have some prints, a couple of prints, which actually only have one layer on them. So these were both taken off of a fairly complex plate. I was printing another layer on top of something else with a lighter tone or a darker tone, had some stencils on there, had an imprint of the previous print, whatever I had put on and taken the paint off with. And then I pulled back the stencils and printed these prints, which are basically a positive with a very interesting background. Both of these I'm going to leave as they are. They are just a single layer print, but from a complex, interesting plate. These are some prints which I don't think need another layer. It may be that I just use pieces of this, but I quite like the cool green combined with the warm green, and the warm green combined with this lighter tone that goes over top of it. I think there's enough interest from the texture in the first plate. This one, I like the cool and the warm colors. And this one has a brighter, duller type of an effect. I think they'll be very interesting accent papers. And the same with these two. This is overall quite a dark paper, but I have a need for those, so that's fine. And this one is sort of more of a mid-tone with a lovely light lilac and a good royal blue type of a feeling to it. So these papers, I'm going to leave them as they are with just the 2 layers. But I have lots to put a 3rd layer on. So I have some darker prints, which, you know, they're interesting, but they're just not super interesting. And I think another layer on them would make them more interesting. Some of them, like these ones, need another layer, but one that is lighter. And then there's some which could go either way. Probably could need a darker layer on. And then there's a few which could go in either direction. I could either print another lighter opaque layer, or I could go with a darker layer on the top. That one needs a dark layer. Could go either direction. Either direction. Could go either direction. And this one just needs a little bit of maybe something a bit darker. Now the other thing I need to think about is how much of the existing print do I want to save in my 3rd layer. So if I want to save a fairly large chunk of it, if I kind of like what's already there, I'm going to need to use a mask which covers up a fair bit of that space. So whatever I cover up is going to get saved. If what I've got back here is just kind of an accent color anyway, then it doesn't matter. I could use a more medium-sized stencil, one that has some open spaces and some masked spaces. So if I want to go lighter on my 3rd layer, I'm going to need something opaque, titanium white to start with for sure, and then I can decide to give that a little bit of a tint if I don't want it to be straight white. So I'm going to give this just a little ultramarine blue in here as well. So for this one, I'm not too worried. There's not a strong pattern here to begin with, so I think I can use one of my regular stencils. Kind of liking the design of this one lately. So this pattern, whatever it happens to be, 1st print, 2nd print, will be preserved wherever the mask is, and wherever the mask isn't will become this lighter color. That's quite interesting with that splotchy blue stuff in there. And there's enough of the light violet, I think, that'll be quite interesting once it dries. For the next batch, I want a light opaque color that's got just a hint of warmth in it. So I'm just adding a little bit of this corn silk yellow. So for this next one, I would like a fair bit of the space blocked out. So I'm going to use this mask. So I've kind of got the fountain of the grasses. Oh, there we are. That's interesting. And now I've got kind of a warm gray and black motif combined with it. Now for these two, I think I'll use this stencil. If you can spend a minute at the beginning and group your papers into what kind of, do you want to go light, do you want to go dark, do you want to go warm, cool, then that can make things a little easier as you progress. I really like that. Yeah, I'm still getting that corrugated cardboard feeling from the first layer. I quite like that. And I think I have enough paint left on the plate to do this one. Yeah, and actually, that's really subtle. Quite what I was looking for. I've got some areas now which are cool, warm, more neutral, lighter, the whole spectrum. So I think like strips of this paper or circles or whatever could definitely work its way into my paintings. Now I think there's enough paint here to get a good impression on this one. Yeah, and that's quite interesting. I think that's all that one needed. I've got a third value on here now, and I've got some really interesting little complex shapes. So the couple of paintings I'd like to add a darker layer to. Not super dark, just darker, and they're both pretty light prints. So I'm going to use some transparent red iron oxide. I don't want this to be an overpowering layer. I would like it to simply be a modifying layer. There we go. And then this one I'm just going to pick up the remainder. And that one came out better. So with this one, there was so much of it that was already a mid-tone, so to put another mid-tone on top of it didn't really save. There was too much of a similarity of color, whereas this one was lighter underneath with a combination of yellows and the browns, and then to put the additional brown over just kind of mellowed it out and made it more interesting. Now normally I wouldn't recommend putting something in the red family over something in the green family, but I'm going to put this over top of this. It's an experiment. It'll work or it won't. That actually worked out quite well. So now I've got some warm green, I've got a more neutral, lighter color, and then I've got this transparent red iron oxide interplaying with it. And it's actually quite a nice clean print. So I've got some nice little voids in several of the areas where the other paper is pointing through. So here's a review of some of my favorite papers that we made in this session. I made at least twice as many as this. And that's it. By layering thoughtfully and working in batches, you can create a beautiful stash of print to use in your mixed media and collage work. Whether you prefer bold textured backgrounds or soft subtle layers, this process gives you so much flexibility. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and let me know in the comments. What colors are you excited to try? And if you want to keep learning more about gel printing, be sure to check out my video on harnessing color for even better results. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.